Geoff Chrysler here, a detail enthusiast, here with my next episode of my BN1 restoration. So I haven't had a lot of time the last few weeks to put in on my BN1. I've just been so busy with upholstery work, but I have been trying to turn it over a few times in the last week or so and not really getting it to fire up. Getting an almost fire, but couple issues, so I've been going through and checking all of my systems and just basically going through a checklist and making sure everything's right, and sure enough I'm finding lots of little things that needed tweaking, so that's part of a restoration. And anyway, but I've been going through it all, so I'll get into that with today's episode. But mostly I did a number of things to the carburetors. And I had a couple small leaks from one of the jets, not a huge one, just a slow occasional drip, and another one on one of my float bowls it was wet along the bottom. Nothing too major, but have to be addressed, of course. So first things first, I've turned the engine and brought it to top dead center. So top dead center means top dead center for number one piston on its compression stroke. So to do that, you can either use a wrench on the front nut pulley of the engine down there, or I've just been pressing using the starter solenoid, just pressing it a couple seconds at a time to bring it around, and then you can feel, if I pull number one plug there and just go in, the top of the piston is right there, so it's at its highest point on the compression stroke. And you know that it's on the compression stroke because both valves here are closed, and the opposing piston that is also going to be at top dead center at the same time as this one is the number 4 piston, and you can see number 4, that valve, the exhaust valve, is still in the open position. So as it's coming up, one is compressing, the other one's still exhausting from the last stroke. So we know we're at top dead center there. So once we're at top dead center, we can now adjust our distributor to make sure that it is about to fire. It is in line with number 1 right there. So you can unbolt the distributor. It's easy to see down here. There's the little bolt assembly around the edge of it. You loosen that off so that you can pull the distributor out and line it up, which I have already done. So if I undo this, you can see as I pull off, we're wanting to fire this one. That is in line with that one. So, and of course, I have rebuilt my distributor, fresh new points, and I've set the point gap there to 14 to 16 thou. And of course you adjust that with these, there's one screw and there's the other one that hold the points in. Make sure you've got your flat washers and lock washers behind them, and just adjust them. And of course, you'll have to turn the distributor when you're adjusting the points. You'll see that the rotor is on a center cam there. It's a 4-sided cam, so you want to make sure it's on a high spot to have them open when you adjust that gap. So gap has been adjusted, and currently they're closed because it's firing number 1 literally. So you can put that back on, and that should get us started. However, meanwhile, I've got to check everything else. I've gone through a basic test of the coil. You can pull the center plug there and just hold it 1/4 of an inch away from the metal source, which I used that clamp, and turn it over. And you can see that there's a spark jumping there, so we know the coil's providing spark. So I'm just going through the diagnostics. I've made sure that all of the valves are adjusted. These are adjusted to 12 thou when they're in a fully open position. I should be able to fit a 12 thou feeler gauge into each one of them. So I've done that. One thing that's kind of stopped me in my tracks now is I've realized I need to order new push rods, because the one thing I didn't replace in this entire engine rebuild, I did new just about everything, pistons and valves and guides, and remachined everything and got it all perfect. However, the tappets and push rods that came with my engine were already replacement ones that I decided to keep. And they are the bucket style cam lifters, tappets that a lot of people prefer to use. They're a much lighter lifter and really work well. And you know, mine were relatively new. There was no wear on them, so I decided to reuse them, which is fine. But the push rods that came with them are not quite long enough, and you'll see some of these more than others are maxed right out so that they're only hanging by a thread just so that they'll reach to adjust them properly. So that's no good. I need more adjustment in them. So I've now gone and ordered a full new set of push rods. Should be pretty easy to pull these old ones out carefully and drop the new ones in. And the new ones are going to be 1/4 of an inch longer, so it'll give me a lot better, finer adjustment. So that's one thing that I've got to wait for before I continue with my trying to get this thing started. And of course I've still got some gaskets that I'm waiting for these float bowls, as well as little screen filters for them. So once those bits come in, we should be able to fire this thing up as far as I know. I've replaced I had to end up replacing my fuel flex line down there. I had installed my original, but as I've been playing with getting this thing started and bringing it up to fuel pressure, that fuel line, while it wasn't super noticeable, when I reached down and grabbed it, I could feel that it was wet on the outside, so I think the old rubber was perishing, so I decided to replace it with a new one. And as you can see, same thing with my oil temperature flex line. I was able to get one of those little Smith's Petroflex logos to add to it, so it looks a little more like the original. Okay, so I've disassembled the jet assembly. I'm rebuilding both carbs basically. What I found was my jets were leaking every time I turned the ignition fuel pump on, and so that's no good, even though they were freshly rebuilt. But my little cork seals that originally came with it were failing, so I've ordered some new O-ring seals, and again I'm going to replace this cork seal with it's a rubber one that's supposed to be impervious to ethanol and any fuels of today, so hopefully this solves the problem. We'll get it all back together. So one thing, I do like to use a little bit of assembly grease, and just on a little brush here, and use it on those new O-rings which I've just installed, and just helps everything to go together a little smoother. I also spread a little bit on the shank here, so we got nice free movement. So here's the reassembled jet assembly, and just about to offer it up to the main carburetor body screwed in through the bottom there. And like I say, we'll screw it up just a couple threads so that the whole thing is still able to move laterally, and then we'll put in the piston and suction chamber again and make sure that we can lift that piston up, and it'll drop down easily on its own as we tighten it up, and make sure that nothing impedes that piston from being able to go up and down on its own. Okay, so I've reattached the suction chamber with the piston inside, and of course the needle comes off the bottom of the piston, and you just got to make sure that if I lift that piston up, it drops freely on its own. So that's good. So I've tightened up the securing nut there, made sure it's nice and tight. I got a good seal there, and I've now run up the jet adjustment nut all the way up to the top, and then backed it off 1.5 turns. And so now it's all set up, and I can reinsert the pin and cotter pin down here for the arms there, and as well as reattach the spring. So there you have it. The jets have been rebuilt with new seals, and this is all functioning properly and nice and smoothly. I can lift the piston, it drops down all the way to the bridge without any impediment, both of them. Get that satisfying clunk at the end. Very nice. So yeah, in combination with rebuilding those jets, I was also getting a little bit of a leak around the bowl here, and so I've ordered some new gaskets. The new ones that I had when I got the rebuild kit, the one had a little nick out of it, so they don't fit very well. They're a little too tight, and I think it was overstretching, and I think the one just snapped. So we'll see how these new ones are. I've ordered them separately rather than in a master rebuild kit, so hopefully it's a better quality gasket this time. And one thing I noticed I didn't even have the whole time was there's little screen filters in the tops of both of these. It's like a little screen filter, like the size of a thimble with a spring that holds it in there. Both of mine were totally missing, so I've ordered some new ones of those. Kind of an important little thing to have to prevent any debris from getting into the carburetor as it comes in through the fuel line there. So make sure you've got your screens, folks. So here you can see this is the float bowl lid removed, so the fuel comes in through here, and that's where I was saying I'm missing those little thimble-shaped screen filters that have like a little spring that hold it in there. So I've got those on order, they're on their way. So inside there you can see there's a little needle valve, and as the fuel fills up the float bowl, the float comes up and shuts off that needle valve. So gotta make sure those valves are nice and smooth working, they're not sticking. And this little lever that rides on the top of the float, it needs to be set so that it's at a 7/16 gap. You should be able to take a 7/16 drill bit like so and slide it under the lid like that, and it should just rest on there at its operating height, so you can bend that lever where it needs to be so that it just sits on that. Yeah, that is a crucial measurement you got to set with the float bowl lid. And like I say, make sure that little needle valve is nice and smooth running, it's not sticking. Now also with these carburetors, I've set up the choke control, which is this here, and just so that it's got both of these arms lifted just enough so that as soon as you pull that choke control, it's going to start pulling on both jets simultaneously. So once that's set up, you should be able to give it full choke. So there they are with the choke pulled open. You can see both jets are pulled open there. And as well as setting that up, I've also adjusted the throttle screws so that you set them at their lowest point and then do one full turn in to open up the throttles just a little bit, and now it should be ready to start. And then once it's started and warmed up, I can adjust those throttle screws to get it at its proper running speed. Okay, so got everything sorted. We've cleaned the points, which were quite dirty, surprisingly. New points don't mean clean points. And beyond that, timing set, carburetors are good to go. I've set the choke. We should be ready to go. So just gonna see how she goes. And there you have it. Sorry to cut that last clip short, but my phone suddenly died. But yeah, I'm gonna wait until I've got those new push rods in before I run it anymore or start tuning it. But at least she fired up, so I'm really happy about that. It is alive. So special thanks to my friend Mike Owen, who dropped by today, and he's a mechanic who works on this stuff all the time, and just kind of went through everything I had done with him, and he said, have you checked how clean those new points are? And sure enough, they were just dirty. So he wiped them down with some emery paper, and bang, that's all it was. So she fired right up. But you know, that's how it goes sometimes, and I'm glad that I went through all of the diagnostics that I did, double and triple checking everything, because I did find some things that I wasn't happy with, and so we're getting those things sorted out, so she's going to be a really good runner, I think. And yeah, really nice to have her fire up for the first time. So like I say, once we get those new push rods in, we can get better adjustment for the valves and get that nicely tuned, and then I can tune up the carburetors and adjust the mixtures, and we'll get her nicely tuned up. That's all for future videos. Until next time, I'm Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast. This is my BN1 restoration. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon. See ya. She goes.